You remember it clearly, standing in the kitchen, afternoon light, a glass in your hand. Someone said something that stayed with you for years. You describe it with confidence, the exact sentence, the expression, the feeling in the room, and then the person across from you smiles awkwardly and says, "That never happened." At first you assume they forgot, but they remember the day too. Same kitchen, same conversation, except in their version, the sentence was different. The mood was different, you were different, and then something strange happens. Not disagreement, disorientation, because you are not arguing over opinions, you are arguing over reality. And beneath that discomfort is a quieter thought. If memory is how you know who you are, what exactly are you trusting? Most people imagine memory as storage, like a hidden archive, thousands of moments stacked neatly somewhere inside the brain waiting to be opened. You imagine that when you remember childhood, your first heartbreak, last Tuesday's conversation, your brain presses play. But memory does not work like replay. You already know this in small ways. You walk into a room and forget why. You reach for your phone automatically and realize you never decided to. You replay an awkward conversation and suddenly remember a detail that wasn't there before. You drive somewhere familiar and arrive with almost no recollection of the route. Your experience of life feels continuous. But underneath that feeling, something more unstable is happening. The brain is not preserving reality, it is rebuilding it, every time, which sounds impossible until you notice how often your mind is already filling gaps. You do not see your blind spot because your brain paints over it. You do not hear every sound in a crowded room because attention edits reality. You do not consciously calculate movement, language, facial recognition, prediction. Your experience arrives already interpreted. Memory may not be different. When you remember, your brain does not retrieve an untouched recording from storage, it reconstructs, and somehow it turns all of that into certainty. Yes, this happened. The unsettling part is not that memory can fail, it is that memory usually feels most certain precisely when it is being rebuilt, which raises a more uncomfortable question. If your memories are not preserved versions of the past, what else have you been quietly rewriting without knowing? What you call memory is not a recording system. It is a reconstruction process, happening in real time, shaped by whatever your brain considers most useful now. Each time you remember something, you are not opening a file, you are assembling a version of the past from fragments distributed across different systems in the brain. The hippocampus does not store a single memory like a folder. Instead, it acts more like a coordinator, binding together scattered elements, visual impressions, sounds, emotions, spatial context, into a coherent experience. But the moment that experience is recalled, it is not preserved, it becomes editable again. Neuroscientists refer to this as reconsolidation. When a memory is activated, it briefly returns to a flexible state. During this window, it can be modified before being stored again. That means the act of remembering is also the act of rewriting, and the rewriting is not random, it is shaped by prediction. Your brain is fundamentally a prediction machine. It is constantly generating models of what is likely to happen next, based on past experience. This predictive system does not turn off when you remember. It actively interferes with the memory itself, filling in missing details in a way that makes the story internally consistent. That means the act of remembering is also the act of rewriting, and the rewriting is not random, it is shaped by prediction. Your brain is fundamentally a prediction machine. It is constantly generating models of what is likely to happen next, based on past experience. This predictive system does not turn off when you remember. It actively interferes with the memory itself, filling in missing details in a way that makes the story internally consistent. So when you recall a conversation, your brain is not retrieving a neutral transcript. It is reconstructing the most plausible version of what should have happened, given who you are now, and what makes sense within your current worldview. Emotion plays a major role in this process. Highly emotional moments are not stored more accurately, they are stored more prominently. The amygdala tags experiences with emotional weight, increasing their accessibility. But accessibility is not accuracy. A memory that feels vivid can still be structurally distorted. This is why traumatic or intense memories often feel extremely clear while containing subtle inconsistencies. The brain preserves the emotional signal more reliably than the factual structure. Attention also acts as a filter at the moment of encoding. You never experience the full environment. You experience a narrow slice of it, shaped by what your attention selects and what your brain predicts is relevant. Everything else is either compressed or discarded. Later, when you reconstruct the memory, those gaps are not left empty. The brain does not tolerate missing data. It fills them using schemas, internal templates built from prior experience. These schemas act like shortcuts, ensuring coherence even when information is incomplete. This is why people can confidently remember the same event differently. Each brain is not retrieving the same recording. Each brain is rebuilding a version optimized for its own internal model of reality, and identity quietly shapes the entire process. You are not remembering as a neutral observer, you are remembering as a current version of yourself, with beliefs, values, and self-narratives that did not exist at the time the event originally occurred. Those present-day structures influence how the past is reconstructed. Over time, memory becomes less about what happened and more about what fits the continuity of who you believe you are. Even language contributes to this distortion. The words available to you now can reshape how past experiences are framed internally. A moment you once felt as confusion might later be reconstructed as intuition. A simple disagreement might be rebuilt as a turning point. Nothing in this system is designed for archival accuracy. It is designed for coherence, efficiency, and survival. A stable narrative is more valuable to the brain than a precise one, which means something subtle but profound is always happening beneath your awareness. You are not just recalling the past, you are negotiating it. And once you see that process clearly, a deeper implication begins to surface, one that affects not only memory, but how you understand your own continuity across time. Once you understand that memory is reconstructed, not retrieved, something quiet but persistent begins to shift in how you interpret your own life. Not dramatically at first, more like a subtle instability under familiar ground. You start noticing how often your certainty about the past depends on how you feel in the present. A conversation you once dismissed might suddenly feel more significant after a relationship changes. The same event, unchanged in reality, becomes heavier because your current emotional framework assigns it new meaning. Nothing external has shifted, but the memory has. This is not unusual, it is happening all the time, and it quietly shapes identity, because your sense of who you are is largely built from remembered continuity. You do not experience yourself as a collection of disconnected moments. You experience yourself as a single thread moving through time. Memory is what stitches that thread together. But if the stitching is being redone each time you look at it, then continuity becomes less stable than it appears. You remember an argument with someone close to you. Over time, you begin to recall it differently, depending on how the relationship evolves. If the relationship strengthens, your memory softens the edges. If it fractures, the same memory sharpens, becoming more defined, more certain, more justified. The past is not just influencing the present is editing the past. In daily life, this shows up in small distortions that rarely get questioned. You are convinced you said something in a particular tone, but the other person remembers it differently. You are sure you arrived somewhere earlier than you did. You recall an intention you never actually formed, but it feels authentic because it aligns with your self-image. These are not failures. They are side effects of a brain that values coherence more than precision. Relationships carry one of the heaviest consequences of this mechanism. Two people can share years of experience and still inhabit entirely different versions of what those years meant. Not because one is lying, but because each reconstruction process is guided by different emotional weights, different attentional histories, different identities being preserved. Over time, this creates a quiet fragmentation, not of truth, but of shared reality. Even your regrets are affected. You do not remember the past as it was. You remember it through the emotional state you can currently access. This means regret is often amplified not by the original event, but by the reconstructed meaning of it. The mind revisits the past not as a fixed record, but as a living narrative that can be interpreted again and again. And there is another consequence that is harder to notice because it happens internally, without comparison. Your self-image becomes increasingly adaptive. Each time you recall a personal story, your strengths, your failures, your turning points, you are subtly updating it to fit your current psychological structure. Over time, this can make the past feel strangely aligned with who you are now, even if the original experience did not carry that meaning at all. It creates the impression that your life has always been moving toward a coherent identity, even when it hasn't. This is where the discomfort deepens, because if memory is constantly aligning the past with the present, then the feeling of stability you rely on, your sense of being a continuous person, is partly constructed after the fact, not false, but edited. And once that becomes visible, a question starts forming in the background. If your past is being quietly rewritten to match who you are now, what is guiding who you become next? The first real shift does not come as insight. It comes as interruption. You are mid-memory, something simple, something familiar, and for a fraction of a second, you notice the construction process underneath it, not the story itself, the assembling of it, like seeing scaffolding behind a finished wall, and then it fades, but it does not disappear completely. Something about the experience lingers, and now the past feels less sealed than it used to. This is where the change begins, not in rejecting memory, not in trying to correct it. That would be another illusion of control, layered on top of the same system. The shift is more subtle. You stop treating memory as authority. A remembered certainty becomes something closer to a hypothesis, a narrative your mind has constructed many times, not a fixed transcript of what occurred. This creates a strange kind of internal space. When you argue less with your memories, you start seeing how quickly they adapt to emotional pressure. A moment from years ago that once felt neutral may suddenly feel charged, not because it changed, but because you are now capable of feeling it differently. And instead of forcing a single interpretation, you begin noticing the movement itself, how memory responds to identity, how identity responds to memory, a loop, not a line. In this space, something important becomes visible. The past is not only influencing who you are, it is being continuously reauthored by who you are becoming. This does not mean the past is meaningless. It means it is not fixed, and that realization changes how you relate to your own certainty. You stop defending memories automatically. You become more curious about them. Why this detail stayed, why that one disappeared, why certain moments return unchanged while others seem to move each time you revisit them. You start noticing that memory is less like storage and more like weather. Patterns remain, conditions change. There is a quiet liberation in this, but not the kind that feels dramatic or absolute. It is more like loosening your grip on something you did not realize you were holding so tightly. You still remember things, you still trust your memory in practical situations. But psychologically, something softens. The need for your past to be perfectly consistent begins to fade. And in that space, you begin noticing something you missed before. You are not just recalling experiences, you are selecting them, highlighting certain moments, downplaying others, organizing them into narratives that support the version of yourself you are currently maintaining. This is where the shift happens, not in gaining perfect memory, but in seeing that you were never supposed to have it. Because if memory were truly fixed, you would be trapped in a version of yourself that could not update. No reinterpretation, no integration, no evolution of meaning. Instead, what you have is a system that rewrites the past to keep you psychologically continuous while still flexible enough to change. And once you see that balance clearly, the question of what really happened becomes less central than another, quieter question. What is this system trying to make you into? Maybe this is the part that feels hardest to accept. Not that memory changes, but that you have been living with this your entire life and rarely noticed. You trusted memory because it felt immediate. You trusted it because it felt personal. You trusted it because it felt like yours. And most of the time, that trust is functional. Memory works remarkably well for what it was built to do. Preserve patterns, maintain continuity, help you navigate a world that moves too quickly to record in full. But somewhere along the way, many of us quietly adopt a different assumption. We begin treating memory as proof of who we are, proof of who other people are. Proof that the story we tell about our lives has remained unchanged. And that is where the tension begins. Because memory was never designed to preserve you exactly. It was designed to help you adapt, which means your mind is doing something stranger and more beautiful than storing events. It is continuously translating your life into meaning. That translation is imperfect. It compresses, it rearranges, it emphasizes, it forgets. Sometimes it protects you. Sometimes it convinces you of things that never happened exactly the way you remember. Sometimes it allows a painful event to become understandable years later, not because the facts changed, but because you did. And maybe that is less a flaw than it first appears. Imagine if every memory remained perfectly untouched, every embarrassment, every grief, every version of yourself preserved with absolute precision, nothing softened, nothing integrated, nothing reinterpreted. You would not become someone new, you would accumulate. Instead, memory keeps revisiting the archive. Not to erase the past, to make it livable. That does not mean every reconstruction is true. It means every reconstruction reveals something. If a memory changes, it may not only tell you something about then, it may tell you something about now. What you fear, what you miss, what you need, what identity you are protecting, what story you are still trying to finish. So the next time you catch yourself replaying a moment with unusual certainty, pause long enough to become curious. And perhaps that is the deeper truth. You are not a fixed record of everything that happened. You are the ongoing reconstruction of a life still being understood. Thank you for watching. If you want more explorations like this into the mind and human perception, consider subscribing to Selvion. Until next time, stay curious.